Welcome back YouTubers to my channel of an everyday life of an Aspie. If you're following me right now, I'm Aspie and I'm all about creating mental health and awareness versus sharing my life stories with Asperger's syndrome, OCD and the like. I also create mental health series basically on everyday, personal struggles you go with of your mental health, or just everyday tips and advice on the mental health series versus just guidance and support through some, beauty from the beauty from ashes topics of what you go through in the everyday struggles or what have you, just to let you guys know that you're not alone regardless what it may be that you go through in your everyday life. In regards to this right now though, I'm doing all about the Let's Talk series, and with this Let's Talk series right now that I'm covering right now, it's all about basically the special education, which is obviously changing the barriers, ensuring access for all education and with special needs as well. In the last piece basically I was covering the support framework, basically the Human Rights Act of New Zealand, what the purpose of it is, what is the Human Rights Act of New Zealand, what they stand for, and obviously they're what it covers in those 13 terms of acts that covers it. Basically also I was talking about the barriers with what children with special needs face in the education sector, as well as some key terms along with the issues, as well as also now just briefly I was talking about in the last piece about the issues that needs to be addressed and what can be done about it. I also now am talking about right now in this last part hopefully the recommendations as well as the summary of it all, along with the these abbreviations that I have to briefly mention, even though hopefully I'll fit it into the description somewhere. Just bear in mind some of these facts and statistics that I've been reading out to is based in the New Zealand statistics format, based on the statistics site that I was looking at, basically of the 2013. Right, so let's begin this. Okay, so just these quick abbreviations before I begin is as follows. COL is Communities of Learning, CRPD Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, ERO Education Review Office, HRC is your Human Rights Commission, IEP obviously as I said before is your Educational Individual Education Plan, IMM Independent Monitoring Mechanism, ITE Initial Teacher Education, IWS Intensive Wraparound Scheme, Ministry obviously is the Ministry of Education in New Zealand, NZCER New Zealand Council of Educational Research, OECD Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development, Ombudsman is of the Office of the Ombudsman in New Zealand, ORS is your Ongoing Resource Processing Scheme, PLD is your Professional Learning and Development, RTLB is your Resource Teachers Learning and Behaviour, SEG Special Education Grant, SENCO Special Education Needs Coordinator, UNCROC that you heard me said just briefly last time was United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, and UNCRPD is your United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. So let's begin this before I run out of time obviously. So the recommendations, as I said before, obviously was quite clear, but to go over it again is the Parliament obviously needs to make amendments or changes of the Education Act of 1989 to include a statement on the purpose of education in line with the Articles of 29 of the UNCROC and 24.1 of UNCRPD. And then the next part of it obviously also the Ministry to investigate ways it can simplify skills that will perform well in relation to the use of diverse approaches to learning and inclusive practices that is needed to be involved. But as we know, basically in the main heading that I said before, also lack of clear expectations for schools. There has been in the last 15 years a lot of range of different policy references to inclusive practices in schools and support for students with disabilities. But however, there has been some absence in any formalised work of reviews, expectations with respect to the school's role in that form of area. There, however, has not been codified and do not have the status use of effect to primary or secondary legislations, as I said before. Another one, also persons with disability is commendable but not going far enough. Okay, in particular, they've noticed the absence of certain things of this. Obviously, that law of Aotearoa that I said about. Basically, I covered that, and obviously, the community rights of persons with disabilities recently highlighted by the AMM, stating that they needed legislative framework to include a clear definition of inclusive education and their objectives. This would clarify the rights for families to enrol their children in a mainstream state school and clarify the role of special schools under an inclusive education policy. Okay, there has been no formalised systems, however, also for determining the needs. In theory, all schools are supposed to provide, discretional support to all students based on their individual needs. There is inconsistency, however, across schools in the way that need is determined and perceived, which determines or means that students will receive only a different level of support across all schools. The identification of learning issues then relies heavily on the classroom teachers' intuition and the school's own internal process for referral to external support where and if necessary. But sometimes in many schools here in New Zealand, however, it has not formalised many referral processes, and teachers don't always feel confident in knowing when to seek further help, support and help. Basically, in 2002, there has been inconsistent levels of support across schools. That was an issue picked up by the Whiteley report, looking at whether provision of discretional special education funding to schools could be weighted towards schools with a high proportion of students with special education needs. Obviously, there has been no changes, however, obviously, to ministry policy have been made since then to try and, get rid of the problem or solve the problem. Aside from the general encouragement for schools to adopt inclusive identification of need would be practices, I should say, a national definition of special needs as means for creating consistency with identification of need would be problematic, as this requires creating a definite boundary of what is characterised as a special need. Obviously, in this part here though, however, that some of the models that they have put into place, which I'm going to give you the link to this report if you want it, or the name of the report I'm reading from and research from, basically that importantly, there has been both models that has clear to create, clear pathways for a student to receive support within the classroom. Dynamic assessment is another similar model which already receives some of use within the New Zealand context and could be developed into a codified model for determining needs. But then again, there has been other problematic stages of what goes on, but again, we need to find solutions and not, rather have too many problems. But then, like I said, something needs to be changed right now in this kind of code of conduct of the education system, especially people with special needs, obviously. So the recommendations is basically, there are about 5 of them, is number 1, a legislative framework to clarify the role of mainstream schools and special schools in relation to students with disabilities. Number 2 is further investigation of building systems such as RTI into the education framework, which teachers can use as a scaffold for their teaching, reflection and practice. Number 3, the promotion of opportunities for teachers to learn and become skilled in using these systems that are introduced in schools. Number 4, a requirement for schools to make clear processes for teachers to access further support for students identified as having additional learning needs. And number 5 is the creation of the code of practice outlining further procedural protections with respect to the provision of education and support to students with disabilities by schools. Okay, I want to address quickly basically the recommendations based on the issues that I'm addressing right now, of the ones like how to word this, just the issues that's been addressed clearly. As the recommendations here is, another one is an enforceable legislative right to reasonable accommodation within the education for all students. Number 2, the creation of a code of practice outlining further procedural protections with respect to the provision of education and support to students with disabilities by governmental bodies. Okay, as we know, basically for the issues relating to the professional development and capacity of educators, however, research has clearly shown that good quality teachers are one of the most important factors for effective classroom learning. obviously, and that saying that we need to bear in mind that with these, that they need to be the ones to lead us to the future and teach us of certain things that is vital. Initial teacher education. Territory level initial teacher education is a formative time for shaping of a teacher's understanding of inclusive theory and practice. It is vital that ITE appropriately provides teachers with the skills to assess the student needs, adapt to the curriculum, support a diverse range of learners, and reflect on their own teaching practices. However, until recently, however, it has been, told that special education has largely been taught with optional courses across most training institutes around New Zealand. However, although training institutes have for the past decade included a focus on differentiated practice, being able to reach a diverse range of learners. This was generally framed without explicit reference to disability. However, concerns have been raised by some that the positioning of special education as optional subject could reinforce the message that teaching disabled students was optional. Alright, next part over is, obviously in 2011, however, the New Zealand Teachers Council has now been replaced by the Education Council, which has been amended by the graduating standards for teachers to include a requirement that ITE providers ensure that graduating teachers have the knowledge and skills relating to inclusive practices for students with disabilities. While this is a considerable step forward, however, some have commented that research into this approach has shown mixed results though, however. And a permeated model doesn't necessarily allow for the time to focus on acquiring necessary skills. But then again, there's also recommendations on this based on number 1, increased focus within ITE on practical skills-based learning. Number 2 is dedicated compulsory course components in relation to supporting moderate and high needs learners. Number 3, strengthen processes around practicum supervision and ensure access within practicum placements to experienced inclusive teachers. And number 4 is strengthen processes around beginning teacher induction and ongoing mentoring for established teachers. Ongoing professional development of tool learning. As we know in our everyday age that we are all learning, and that the roles and responsibility for teachers and other roles in society has changed really dramatically or drastically in the last few years, and the success of including learners with disabilities relies heavily on the strengthening and development of the education profession as a whole. However, many teachers feel that they have a lack of knowledge of or adequate support to adapt to that curriculum to students with higher learning needs. Families with children with additional learning needs will also complain that the attitude and lack of knowledge of their child's teacher creates a barrier to education, as well as what I said before, exclusion in the class. They may be labelled as disruption. They may be labelled as just not being able to go about it. It is unsurprising that when many educators report believing that the mainstream education setting isn't the appropriate learning environment for some students with disabilities, educators still hold on to the belief that students with disabilities don't belong in a mainstream education will be hard-pressed to buy into or accept the cultural shift toward normalising disability within the inclusive education system if they don't feel capable or supported to make the corresponding changes to their own practices. A teacher's attitude towards these students is strongly connected to learning outcomes for students who need additional learning support. Teachers will be influenced and limited by their own overall school culture, which is often set by school leadership, in particular, basically, the principal, obviously, who's the head of the school. A school's culture towards openness and change has been shown hugely is important in adapting to changes in the direction of the education policy, and this culture is influenced by the professional learning and development of educators and school leadership. Right, basically, currently the Ministry essentially funds a range of PLD programs for educators to participate in an opt-in basis. Schools may provide additional funding towards professional development from its original funding or special education grant, whilst teachers must participate in some form of PLD in order to maintain their registration. There is no minimum number of hours that must be completed. Teachers are generally expected to undertake PLD in their hours outside of the class and can be required by the school to undertake PLD outside of school time under their collective employment agreements. Basically, there has been a few studies that has shown when looking at the amount of PLD has undertaken by the teachers. However, there is a correlation between high intensity PLD average of at least 49 hours of PLD per 6 to 12 month periods, and a 21% increase in the student achievement. When looking at the low intensity PLD across the same time period, 5 to 14 hours, this was correlated with no change in their student achievement. However, while there may be multiple unseen factors to play here, the correlation appears to suggest that PLD needs to be heavily prioritised in order to see returns in student achievements. Meaning basically here is that we need to be sure that the needs be met in this part of it all. Okay, for the recommendations, however, is number 1, ensuring that schools maintain as much ownership over COLs as possible. Number 2, investigation of using COLs to create opportunities for more direct teacher monitoring. Number 3, encourage schools to utilise teaching schedules in a way which allows for teachers to collaborate together to prepare lessons. And number 4, funding to schools for dedicated teacher release time to engage in PLD. Okay, as we know, there has been a lot of other issues that they need to look into, obviously, and that within that time period, we have noticed that sometimes that, ever since the introduction of special education in 2000, basically, we have maybe severely understated the nature of teachers' roles. Some of the ways in which demands teachers in relation to students with disabilities has increased, however, when this was introduced, including expectation that teachers will adapt to the curriculum content to various levels in their planning, the utilisation of multiple pedagogies to engage with students, supporting individual students with higher learning needs, working alongside and managing teacher aid, liaising with other support agents, including the special education needs coordinator, resource teachers, learning and behaviour specialists, and the list so on. This needs to be recognised that despite the increase in demand, schools have not been given additional release time to enable teachers to carry out those other duties. There also has been a clear shift in teachers' salaries that can attribute to compensating teachers for the evolving role. Although beginning teachers earn just above the average of what other students with tertiary educations do in New Zealand, not taking into account how this works. They earn less than their teaching counterparts overseas, however. Basically, in 2014, OECD report has been comparing teacher hours that shows that the teachers have the 5th highest working hours compared to across the OECD, while primary teachers have been spent slightly less time in the classroom. 60% of the working hours are required at school, however, than the average across the OECD. 65% secondary school teachers spend more time in the class and 50% of the working hours required at school. It should be noted that this data doesn't always take into account of the hours worked by other teachers outside of the hours of school that are open. The respective collective employment agreement for teachers in New Zealand does not stipulate a maximum number of total working hours, so the weekly hours teacher will work depending on the requirements of the individual school. However, not any additional hours the teacher calls in from their own personal time. Meaning, obviously, the time they spend will ensure basically bits and pieces. But the recommendations in this part of what I'm trying to address here is, number 1, ensure teacher salaries are appropriately taken into account for the actual working hours. Number 2 is the increased teacher release time. Okay, another issue needs to be addressed is lack of training for teacher aides. Teacher aides are a commonly used resource for supporting students with high learning needs in the classroom, as we know. The intention behind the use of these teacher aides is usually to provide more one-on-one support for students who needs it most, which ensures the teachers are able to attend to the entire classroom. Given the amount of time which they spend with a student, that can be a crucial component in the learning process, and a highly skilled teacher aide can make a substantial impact on their student achievement. The role of the teacher aide doesn't require any qualifications, and due to the often transient nature of employment, is often filled by students or unskilled workers who, despite their dedication to the job, often lack any experience or knowledge of the disabilities. The Ministry also does not provide any specific funding for teacher aide professional development. Any training is currently paid for out of operational funding or the special education grant, which is usually considered a low priority. Both teachers and families have highlighted concerns, though, about teacher aides lacking the relevant skills. This is probably aggravated by the historic attitude of leaving students with high learning needs to be looked after by the teacher aide while the teacher teaches the rest of the class. Supporting the teachers work closely alongside with teacher aides to direct the implementation of the individual curriculum and any individual education plan. Recommendations here are: number 1, investigation into creating career paths for teacher aides, and number 2, funding for a base level of skill-based training. As we know, basically, the list goes on and on about all these issues that needs to be addressed, obviously, but then, we need to know what we can do for this, obviously. And in summary to this, though, how I look at it is that regardless of what's going on of all this, we need to go about finding ways to best fit for everybody's needs, regardless of funding versus the specialised needs for children with, disabilities, along with other bits and pieces, as well as looking into proper training and whatnot, maybe. And that no matter what happens, that we should be able to look into it properly and see if we can put together a collective consensus for it all, of what works and what doesn't, and then maybe reevaluate of all these bits and pieces I've clearly addressed and more. Because obviously at the end of the day, like someone said to me in Facebook, that we need to change certain things again, but will people listen to that form of change regardless what it may be, or not really? Because obviously, at the end of the day, we're all responsible for our learning, we are responsible for our choices, we are obviously all, entitled for what we need to know about, and that no matter what, that we should be able to access the needs in schools as well as out of school of the services that are supposed to be, available for all people, not just for people with disabilities, regardless of it all. That, as I said, something needs to be changed. And to me, how I look at it at the moment, that this is obviously being ignored of certain things that needs to be addressed, and how I look at it later on, we should be able to, find ways that will best fit for everybody, regardless of us with special needs and all that as well. But that's all I can think of right now to conclude right now on this summary versus the recommendations and everything else on this challenging the barriers, ensuring all education for all people with disabilities as well. Give me a like for a thumbs up for support. Comment below to start a discussion about all this if you feel the must and have to. Feel free to comment below just to say hi, or just to show that you're engaging, as well as your thumbs up. But just feel free to subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so. Feel free to also follow me on Twitter, Facebook, AspieAnswersAll. Feel free to share these videos to family and friends, because like I said, some of these videos need to be addressed obviously to everyone, so that we know what's going on from down right now. Thanks for the support, thanks for watching. Do what you love what we do. Aspie signing out.